Hey, with us now from Washington, contributing editor for Newsweek magazine and the Washington Post, Robert Samuelson. Robert's also the author of the book, The Great Inflation and Its Aftermath, The Past and Future of American Influence. And in the new issue of Newsweek and the Washington Post today, Robert tells the United States to wake up on the budget crisis, writing, quote, "The lack of seriousness is defined by three missing words: balance the budget." These words are taboo, and in February, President Obama created a National Commission on Fiscal Responsibility and Reform, call it the Deficit Commission. Its charge is to propose measures that would reduce the deficit in level of interest payments on the debt by 2015 so as to stabilize the debt-to-GDP ratio at an acceptable level. Understand? No. Well, you're not supposed to. Robert, I did not understand that, actually. I want to show you, Robert, and by the way, we decided today we're going to do something different with you. We're not going to actually set the NBC studios in Washington on fire while you're sitting there. So you won't hear any fire alarms today. But here's an alarm for you to look at. This is an IMF chart. IMF predicting the United States is going to be, their debt-to-GDP ratio will be 100% by 2016. Explain why that is so dangerous for this economy.
Well, it's dangerous for two reasons. One is that even if the financial markets don't lose faith in our ability to repay the debt, the interest payments will go up dramatically, and so Americans will be facing higher and higher interest payments, and that will, to take the projections, for example, of the Congressional Budget Office, this year our interest payments are a little bit more than $200 billion. By 2020, they're roughly $900 billion. If you take the IMF projections, they'd be even higher. So the fastest growing part of our budget now is interest payments. The second reason it's dangerous is that at some point, investors, the lenders, the people who buy the U.S. bonds may become skeptical that we're actually going to repay our debt, and then interest rates would go up even more, and they would almost certainly then force very dramatic and abrupt cuts in spending and tax increases.
Mr. Samuelson, what one thing more than any other should President Obama do to deal with this problem beginning today? Give him one thing more important than the others.
Well, I would say what he ought to do is what I suggest in the column, and that is to come out and say that the goal of his administration is to balance the budget within a reasonable period. Now, I said 2020 in the column, which gives us a huge amount of time. I think 2018 or even 2017 would be better. But instead of adopting all these goals that are essentially unintelligible to average people, debt-to-GDP ratio, primary balance, which is a balanced budget, not including the interest payments, he ought to come out and embrace the goal.
But Robert, I can't get anybody on this show to give me a date certain by which you balance the budget. I agree with you. But I ask, can we balance the budget in 10 years? I don't know how. 12 years? Not sure. 15 years? Why?
Of course it
can be done. Why can't politicians, even with the examples of California, New York, Greece, understand this has to be done?
Because no one wants to shoulder the responsibility of allocating pain. The only way you can really balance the budget is you have to reduce people's benefits somewhat, and you have to raise taxes somewhat. You can't do it by doing one or the other alone, because the spending cuts, if you did only spending cuts, would be horrendous, and the tax increases would be more than 50%. So you have to have some sort of a combination, and nobody, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, nobody wants to stand up and say, look, we have to find a way of allocating the losses and the pain over the entire society in a way that everyone dislikes but most people consider fair. And no one is really willing to do that. So that's why you don't get anybody to come on and say, I'm going to balance the budget by 2018 or 2020 or 2022.
Harold Ford.
I just come back to Dan. I'm a big fan of yours, Mr. Samuelson, but I come back to Dan Rather's point. The one thing the White House could do today to put us on path, because they picked the date they want to balance the budget. It's, years out here, but no one's opposed to that. So is it Social Security or Medicare? That's a bigger challenge.
What's a year?
I mean, the president said I think he said by 16 they want to balance. They'll have a balanced budget.
But the president's put his budgets out there, and look at the line that it goes straight up. Our debt over the next decade goes straight up. So
let's assume
look at that.
Obama's
But look at that number, though.
Okay.
How can anybody say that this White House or any Republican in Washington, D.C. is suggesting we balance the budget when this is our own projected budget?
So name one thing. So name one thing we would do today. I'd say Obama hasn't done it. We can disagree. Give me one thing that you would do. Is it Social Security? Is it Medicare?
Well,
is it defense?
I would say that the one thing he could do is announce that his goal is to increase the eligibility age for full benefits for Social Security and Medicare to 70 gradually.
He'll do it in January.
And that's
Amen.
He'll do it in January.
And say if you're 55 years or younger, you're going to get Social Security and Medicare at 70. It would make a huge
I would phase it in over some period, but I would say also that I'm 64.
Right.
People like me have to take some cuts.